In this example app, we are going to look at developing a die roll game. Now, dice are used in all types of games, and this app will essentially have a button, and when that button is clicked, it will simulate a die roll. This is the document that you will be working from. It gives you an overview as to what the app is about. Please do read this, and then there's some instructions here in terms of designing the interface, how you should go about naming the different outlets and actions, and there's some extension tasks here as well, should you decide to challenge yourself further. So what I've already done is I've already developed, created my app. I've already added the storyboard objects to the interface. Now you should be pretty familiar with this already because we've gone through this in detail. So you can actually find these objects from the object library, and you can also follow the instructions in the document here. Okay, so the next step for me to do then is to really make connections, because I want this image to change every time a button is clicked, and then this label will also essentially reflect the number of the actual roll itself. Okay, so the number that I actually get, um, that's generated, that is reflected on the face of the die, will also be reflected on the label here. So if we go back to the document here, it says here, so we've done this, we've actually called, we've done the project here, and what we need to do is we need to number two here is to create a connection to the to add the image view. Okay, and this is what we've done already. Number three is to download the Direwolf game resources. So you can see here, I've already got these here. These are the game resources, and essentially it's an image for each face of the die. And one thing to point out, whenever you are actually creating these image assets or you're downloading these image assets, make sure that they are appropriately sized. You don't want an image asset which is 3 to 4,000 pixels, um, by 3 to 4,000 pixels, because of the fact that it will extend beyond the edge of your display. It's too large. Okay, so you can see here that I've resized these to 300 by 300 pixels. These can be a little bit smaller as well, but it's perfectly fine for this example, and it shouldn't make much of an effort. The smaller your assets within your image, the more kind of essentially when you pack up the project, it won't take up as much space. And the other thing as well is you can see here that I've already named all of my assets as well. So please don't be putting in assets into your asset library with names like screenshot and date stamp or just random file names. Make sure that you go to the effort of actually renaming your assets. So what we're going to do here, first of all, to add assets to our project, first of all, we need to open up the assets folder. So I'm going to single click on the assets folder. Okay, I'm not double clicking, just single clicking. And you can see here that this area here, this black area here, where you see these app icon or accent color, these icon sets, what we're going to do is we're going to add our assets to here, image assets to here. Okay, you don't want to add it to anywhere else in the project. It must be added to the assets folder, because then it keeps things nice and organized. Another thing to note as well is you can't just drag on top of the folder to add to the assets folder. So the workflow is you click on the assets folder first to open up the assets folder. Then in this area here, it may look white on your screen depending on the theme of Xcode that you're using. If it's dark theme, this is what it will look like. If it's light theme, this will be white. And I'm just going to select everything here and just drop everything here. You can see it's added all of the assets. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my main storyboard. I'm going to go back to the document as well here. Remember, I'm following the document, and so should you. Um, You'll need a label to display an image. Search for a label. Okay, so we've added the label and we've also added the button. So these are all kind of interface related, essentially to do with the storyboard. Now I'm moving on to here. So it says here you need to create an IB outlet for each of the storyboard objects. And the first one we're doing it for is the image view. And we actually call this die roll image. So I'm going to go back to my Xcode here. I'm going to select this, single click, and then control drag from here. okay, and just going to drop it there and call it die roll image. And you can see here that this is in camel case, right? So it's small. The first word of the first letter of the first word is in lowercase, and then the first letter of every subsequent word is in uppercase. So die roll image. I'm not going to change anything else. I know that it's connecting to the image view, not the view itself, right? Not the background view. Make sure that that is correct, and then click on connect, and you can see the connection is established here. One of the questions I keep on getting asked is how should you organize your code? Where should you, if you're creating another outlet, how should you, where should you actually put it? And the way I actually like to structure my code is I like to have all of the IB outlets at the top, then a space, and then all of the variables and maybe constants I need, then a space, and then all of the actions and functions that I need as well. And you'll actually see me doing this right now. So remember that the IB outlet, the whole purpose of the IB outlet is to access or change the properties of an object. So we want to change the properties of this UI image view from within our code, and this is how we do this, right, through an outlet. We need to do the same thing with the label, so I'm just going to control drag from the label here, just going to drop it underneath, not going to drop it anywhere else outside here or down here, right? Just going to drop it just directly underneath the existing IB outlet. Go back here, and we need to call this die roll label. Okay, so I'm going to say die roll label. Okay, and hit connect. Okay, that's done as well. So you can see here that the die roll image is connected, the die roll label is connected, and then we also need to create a connection for our button. Now, the button itself, we're not modifying the properties of the button. What we want the button to do is when we click on the button, we want it to run some code. So therefore, we're not using an outlet for this. Rather, we're actually using an IB action. So you can actually see here. The naming convention is die roll action. Please do read this document because it gives you detailed instructions. So I'm going to control drag here, just underneath. You can see I've left a blank line there. Die roll action. Now this time here, I'm going to change this from an outlet to an action, right? Because I don't want to change the properties of the button. I just want the button to actually do something when actually pressed or clicked. So I'm not going to change anything else. I'm going to hit connect here. Okay, which is good. Just going to give myself a little bit of space there. And remember that whenever you have an action, all of your code needs to go within these two brackets. If you put anything outside here, your app will fail and you will have problems running or building the app. So remember that if we want the button to actually do something, it needs to be within the brackets of that function. And what I like to do is, once I've created the function, I like to give myself a bit of room here. And you can see here that this area here will actually contain the code for this function. So when this button is clicked, the function will run, and it will actually run any code within the actual button function. So what we need to do here right now is to start kind of thinking of the randomization. Okay, so how do we actually generate a random number? So if we go back to this document here, you can see here that it doesn't give you any instructions beyond simply kind of naming the connections, and this is essentially why we have the video here. Okay, so what we're going to do right in the video right now is to first of all let's just try giving ourselves creating a variable. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var, and I'm going to call die roll equals. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is to give this an initial value of 0. Okay, so we know that this is an integer. We've created a variable called die roll, and it's an integer with an initial value of 0. So when this button is clicked, we obviously want that to change to a random number. Okay, and it's quite easy. You can see I've just tabbed this in. Tabbing is you need to make sure that your code is organized properly, and tabbing is just one way to do that. Okay, tabbing, you have to make sure that your code is tabbed in just to ensure that your code is more readable. One thing I like to do as well, especially for students that are new and don't know where to tab, how to tab, is just to put the cursor at the end of the beginning curly bracket, okay, and press enter, and it will position your cursor in the correct location. So here, what we want to do is we want to change this value here. So whenever the button is clicked, we want to really change this value and give us a random number. Okay, so we want to say die roll because we already have created the variable here, and then we want to give it a random integer. So int dot random. Okay, and then what we want to do is give it a range of values. Now, a die has 6 sides, so therefore it has 6 potential values, 1 through 6. Okay, so we say here 1, and then here to 6. Okay, so what will happen is when this button is clicked, it's going to give it a value, random value from 1 through 6. Okay, and then it's going to update this die roll variable. You can see here variable where it says die roll initially 0, then it's going to say die roll equals int.random 1 to 6, meaning that this die roll variable that you've created here is going to be updated to the value, whatever the value is from 1 to 6. At the same time, we want to change this label. Okay, we want to change this label here, and it's quite simple to do that. So we know that this is called die roll label. So we say die roll label, and you can see here that Xcode is quite smart. It uses this code completion, right? It'll give you this drop down. So as you start typing the name of variables or constants, it will actually find them for you and you can access them from a list. So it's quite smart to do that. So we'll say die roll label, and then we want to access the text property. Remember that a label, a button, any storyboard object has multiple properties. So we want to access the text property, right? So it says here text, the text that the label displays. That's just some helpful information for you there. So we want to say .text equals, and right now we can begin thinking of the type of value that we want this label to display. Now, one thing you have to note is that a label has a default data type of type string. We have an integer here. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that this is actually converted to a string. This number here needs to be converted to a string in order for us to take that value and put it inside the actual text box here. Okay, the label here. So let's just begin typing in a value here. So we're going to say here dice roll label.text. You have rolled a, and then what we want to do is we want to take this value here. Okay, so the way we do that is we use string interpolation here. So we use a backslash and then a bracket here and then die roll. Okay, now this may not work immediately. So essentially what we're doing here is saying, okay, this is the value that's going to be assigned to the label, the text value of the label whenever the button is clicked. And it's going to take the value of die roll, whatever that value is, and it's going to interpolate it. It's going to add it or include it within this text label. Okay, and the next thing we want to do really is just probably want to change this value here. Okay, so we say roll die, or roll dice. Die is the singular form of dice. Dice is plural. Okay, so we're in a position now where we can actually test this app. So what I'm going to do is always change this. Right, remember we're designing on an iPhone 11. You can see here we want to change this to an iPhone 11 so it's kind of the dimensions are correct and it's previewed properly. So and we probably want to remove this this value here, right? This is the default value of a label. Now, whenever we are running the app, we don't want it just to say label there, so we want to kind of get rid of that here. Just remove that. We know that the label exists, right? It's still there. So if I just run this, now you probably can note that my Xcode looks a little bit different because this is the most recent update. So you can see here that I'm running version 13. Okay, it looks a little bit different, but it shouldn't be significantly different to what you are experiencing and what you are using on your computers. Okay, so here it is. we have our interface already loaded. Now, obviously, you can't see the image view because there's no image there yet. You can't see the label because um, there's nothing to present there just yet. But if we click on the roll die button here, what we should see is um, this number that's changing. Okay, you can see here that this is a text value that's changing, which is great. Now, one thing we failed to do, and I'm just going to stop this here, is to change our image. Okay, that was one thing that we needed to do. So we're going to go back to that, and just here we're going to say die roll image, okay, dot image. Okay, we're saying the dot image property of the die roll image view equals UI image. Okay, and then we say here named. So now we called our images, if you go back to here, we've called them die face 1, die face 2, die face 3, die face 4, so on and so forth. Okay, so we need to somehow kind of put in this text value here, and then a number here. Okay, so or alternatively, what we can do is let's just make it easy. Okay, we're going to go here inside the assets folder. Okay, let's just I'm single clicking on these values, and I'm going to say 1, 2. We'll just make it a little bit easier. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, go back to our storyboard here and our code, and we're going to say that this value is going to be named die roll. Okay, now you're probably thinking, what's going on here? Well, let me just explain to you here. This is not going to work immediately because we need to do something with this value. So let's just go over this bit by bit. So here we're saying access the die roll image, which is the outlet. Then this is the property. This is the image property, right? This is the actual image that's going to be contained with this image view. Again, this image view has several different properties. Image is one of them. And then we're saying that this is a UI image and then named. Now, typically here, if we just type in the name of 1, let's just say, right? And the reason why I've put this in quotations because it's expecting a string value. Okay, so we'll actually need to convert this die roll because right now this is a number. We'll need to do a little bit of a conversion. But this is just to show you that if I do that, and if I load this app, okay, when the app loads up, and when I press this button, it's going to, regardless of what the value is, it's going to load something called image number 1. Right, you can see that there. Even though this is a 2, it's loading the die which is named as 1. So we know that the image view is actually working. So what we need to do is we need to fix this. So we don't want to have a hard-coded value inside here. What we want to do is put in the actual die roll, right? Because this is 1 to 6, and then our images are 1 to 6. And when a die roll is, for example, 4, it's going to load the image which is also named 4. Now, we need to do a conversion from an integer to a string, and it's quite easy to do. All we do is we type in string here, capital S, and then we put in a bracket here, and we say die roll. Okay, so essentially it's saying do a conversion, convert this this value, which is currently an integer, convert that to a string. Now our UI image view kind of line of code here is perfectly fine. It's not giving us any errors. It's in the right format. Now, if I run this again, Command R is a shortcut. Okay, so I'm going to replace that. Just rerun this. Now, if I click on this, it says here you've rolled a 5. Okay, if I do it again, 4, and you can see here that the image is actually changing. 2, 6, 4, etc. Okay, so what we've done in this example app is create a project. We've created the outlets, 2 outlets. One was for the image view, one was for the text label, and then we actually created an action for the roll die button. okay, because the action essentially allows us to run code. And then what we actually did was we just, again, created a simple variable dirroll, which is a random value, which has a random value between 1 and 6, which is each side of each face of the die. And then what we did with that value is we interpolated that into a string. So we actually added that value to a string here. And at the same time, we actually took the same value and we've said, okay, the image that's going to be loaded up inside this particular image view is going to be called this number, whatever that number is. And that number aligns to each image that we have here. Okay, so I hope that has made sense. I hope that you've learned something from this. And we have some extension tasks here at the bottom. So for those of you that haven't gotten this far, maybe you can kind of consider looking at this. So how can we prevent duplicates in each dice roll? So the same number should not appear sequentially. And then change the above message. So this label here on the simulator here where it says you've rolled a 1, how can you do it so it actually keeps a sequence of all of the rolls that you've actually done?